System on. Welcome, councillors, to this budget session. We will be talking about capital budgets tonight, continuing on from where we were earlier. So I have the agenda before us tonight. I'm still fighting my cold. I think we live in a time of not 1 week colds, but 2 or 3 week colds. I'm just sort of counting it lucky that you don't seem to be affected. He and I drove to and from Roma together, and there must have been a cone of silence in the car that protected you somehow from. Yeah, exactly. So spray him down. So anyway, everyone, welcome. Thank you for your participation and your good grace tonight. We have a motion pertaining to tonight's agenda. I don't think there are any amendments, Pat, that we have to concern ourselves with. Okay, so I have a resolution for our consideration that the agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. Can I invite a mover? Deputy Mayor Callum, thank you, and Councillor Seiler. Any discussion or debate? We're not using eScribe tonight, I don't think, so this is just one of the old-fashioned, all those in favor, any opposed, and that is carried. I will remind councillors of their responsibility to declare any financial or pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Should there be anything on tonight's agenda, you may do that now or at any point during the meeting. With that said, that brings us to item number 2 on our agenda, and that's item 2.1. The minutes have been circulated, and I have a resolution for our consideration pertaining to adoption of those minutes from the January 22nd, 2020 Budget Committee meeting. The resolution reads that the minutes of the 2020 budget meeting on January 22nd, 2020 be adopted. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Johnston, thank you, and Councillor Andreessen. Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. We have nothing to report under delegations or presentations for this evening's meeting, which thus brings us to item 4 on our agenda, the reports from staff pertaining to the capital projects. The first up is Amy Gangle, our interim manager of recreation. She is speaking to tab 4, project sheets 8 and 9 in the budget book. And this is follow-up, I believe, from our session at the last meeting where a few requests were made. I think Amy felt it was prudent to just get on with it. So thank you, Amy, for coming back. And let me just get the microphone on for you. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As part of the agenda for this evening, you'll notice that the Recreation Department added a summary of facility utilization for your information, just a coverage of the usage over the past 5 years. That was something that council had requested. We just pulled it out of our draft business plan and to share that with you for your information and resources. Project 8. Per council's direction at our last budget meeting, the costs to relocate the hydro supply for the ball lights was transferred into this project detail sheet. We're requesting approval for this project in order to begin the steps required for the demolition of the Listowel Memorial Arena.
Councillors, questions at this point in time? Do I have a resolution here? I think so, eh? I do. Okay, so we have a resolution under item 4.1 for our consideration. The resolution reads as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approve the 2020 budget for Listowel Memorial Arena demolition and redevelopment for $240,000, including the relocation of the electrical box for the ball diamond lights. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Behrens, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Seiler, thank you. Any discussion or debate? Councillor Seiler.
Just one question. My question is, if we go and do this and remove the electrical panel from the Listowel Memorial Arena, and we later find that we have an environmental problem when we go to the removal of the arena, what then? Is the environmental going to
The environmental will, from my understanding, is it will depend on what the redevelopment plan looks like. Depends on what that land will be reused for. Will depend on what levels of analysis we'll need to do and how that will affect the plan.
Okay. Did you have anything further on that one, Councillor Sadler? You want to follow up or? No? Okay. Councillor Johnston.
Well, just a comment, but either way, whether there's environmental or not, that building's still coming down, right?
Council's direction, yes.
Yes, well, and that's what we've decided already. But I think we get the building down and then we deal with the environmental is the way I would understand it.
Yes, that's our understanding.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Kellum.
Mason Care. So just to make it clear, we still have control of everything moving forward. This is the first step of
Correct.
many steps moving on.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And Amy, just can you confirm my understanding based on looking 8 and 9, these two projects have to go together because of the upgrade that's required for the lighting. Is that true or not?
Council requested us to separate the two projects. I will be presenting the second one for Council's consideration tonight. If you want me to present that one next, I can, or we can deal with this, finish this, and we can deal with the second.
Go ahead.
The only reason why I understood that they're linked together is because of the requirements. If we do change the lighting, that it would behoove us, if we're moving over the electrical, is that we would be doing the required upgrades for that because of the change of the requirements of the lighting from the old system, or current system, I should say, through the proposed new LED lighting. Is that true?
So, yeah, perhaps I should highlight project number 9 now and then discuss that.
It's a little irregular.
Okay, that's fine. Wait.
If I may, I think they're related. I mean, I'm fine that we deal with them separate, but if we can understand that they truly are together, because, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if we move forward with simply moving the electrical system from the current arena building over to the new, to a new building, shed, and so on, would we just be simply bringing that system over and installing that system as is? And then if Project 9 moves forward, then we would do whatever changes are required for that?
Correct.
At that time? Or if we move forward with 8 and 9, we would do them all at the same time?
Correct.
Okay, okay, so we can do 8 without doing 9?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It sounds like the aspiration of staff is that there's a coherent landscape for this, that we do all of this together, but we're handling it, I think, as separate projects at this point, if I understand what's happening here. Okay, further questions or comments at this point in time? All right, so this has been duly moved and seconded at this point, so are we ready for the vote? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. Let me just switch the sources back so you can show the next document.
So just bringing Project 9 to Council's awareness again. Since last week's budget meeting, staff have received some more details on John Bell North, John Bell South Light Tower replacement. We've updated our project detail sheet for Council's consideration tonight regarding that. This information is very, very recent, and I actually received some more information today, so we'll share that. Currently, 600-volt power is required for the John Bell South and John Bell North lights. Parts to repair these have been a challenge over the past years for staff and our contractors. Manufacturers have standardized on single-phase, three-phase lighting, so 120 to 277 volts and 347 to 480 volts. Lighting products. With the relocation of the power to the new building, it's recommended the lights be converted to LED, requiring a more modern power supply, depending on as dictated by the utilities infrastructure. Due to the age of the towers, for safety reasons, the new lights cannot be placed on top of these aging towers. Therefore, new ball towers and lights are recommended for John Bell South and John Bell North with the change of the power needs. We did get further information with regards to the Save on Energy program, and so concluded that this project does not meet the criteria of this rebate program because of the minimum number of operating hours that has to fit in for that. We have heard back. We consulted with Hydro One just to make sure if there were any issues. They have confirmed today that there is no issues with moving the power. We'll get our electrician if we move forward with this to do a site visit with them. They have also advised us if there's any dire needs or if there's any situations that arise that we can't make any major decisions, that they have the ability to have a portable box that could be temporarily used to relocate this 600 volt until decisions are made. So those are options that they've given us just today.
Okay. Are we sensing, should council's wish be to proceed, are we sensing a timeline on this that will be cooperative against the Legionnaires baseball season and other uses?
Certainly, we will keep our users in mind with how we can do things. The sooner we can delve into this and move forward with it to make sure that our ball users still have light for this season, definitely be beneficial. If there's some large hurdles and we're unable to provide lighting and it just isn't suitable for the users, then we may have to wait till after the ball season. Our hope is not to have that. If we find that we have those hurdles and we need to do this portable unit, we can do that.
But if I've understood you correctly, and I just want to make sure that I did hear what you said, you indicated that at this point they're saying that new light hardware on the old towers is not going to be viable.
Correct. What they've said is that there's nobody that would sign off on the safety aspect, the inspection component of it, with their lights on the safety of what those conditions of those towers would be.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councillors, further questions? Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my recollection, we had one other question as to the materials between the towers on the John Bell North and John Bell South. Did staff go out and review that? I don't think there was a question in terms of whether the north towers were the same condition and the same age as the ones in the south, as I recall. I'm just looking at our deputy mayor in particular, who may have more specific knowledge about that, but I think you were the one that raised it, if I'm not mistaken. But
we went back to double check the information. I actually got my numbers mixed up. The John Bell South towers are 1978. John Bell North, they're 1982. That's where we have limited information, but that's the information we received. The John Bell North are the ones that you see in the picture in the package with the webbed towers, whereas the John Bell South has a more solid appearing tower. We did talk to our consultants with regards to that, knowing different shape, and they said it's the age. Nobody is going to replace those lights and sign off on that, knowing how old those towers are.
good, thanks very much. I just want to make sure that council heard the information. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rothwell. Further questions, comments at this point? Okay, so we have a resolution prepared for our consideration to move this along. That the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approve the 2020 budget for John Bell South and John Bell North ball light tower replacements. I assume this includes the lights as well? Like, is this a single consolidated budget for tower? Okay, so let me try that again. I'll read it again. That the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approve the 2020 budget for John Bell South and John Bell North ball light tower replacement for $210,000. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kellum, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried.
Thank you.
Thanks. That brings us to item 4.2 on the agenda for the evening, and I believe it brings back CAO Snell for some information under tab 5 of our budget book. Welcome, CAO Snell.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will briefly review the 2019 projects and the 2020 projects, and then I will be asking Kim Couch, the Community Development Officer, to speak briefly about the two economic development projects that we applied through for RED, as well as the Logan project. So in 2019, the administration department had 6 capital projects, and they're all carryovers. So I don't know, in 2019, I was able to complete zero of the projects, but having said that, they're very close to being completed. So the Northeast Master Plan, as Council's been aware, there's been several presentations in 2019, and we're really have that plan ready to submit to the ministry for final approval, just pending a couple of minor issues. The Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reduction Plan, which is the program involving all 7 municipalities in Perth County. A tremendous amount of work's been done around the reduction plans, and Rebecca will be presenting to all councils earlier this winter or early spring. The intranet is ready to launch in early February. The pay compensation review is well underway, but has been slowed down certainly because Jen's been off since late November. The Science Revitalization project continues to move forward and has for the last several years. And the public transit service is soon becoming finalized, and we're still targeting a launch date of April of this spring. Hopefully we can make that yet, but I know the city of Stratford is very close to awarding the tenders or the RFP that was received earlier this year. So just a couple loose items to tie up, and hopefully that process will be ready to go by April. New projects in 2020 is the administration efficiency review, which is part of the application we made to the province for the modernization program. As council's aware, we received money for the county application, which takes a review of our winter operations, and that project is well underway, but is being led by the county. And we have not heard yet on our grant application. Now, at Roma, all the partnership applications were awarded, and they're reviewing the rest of the applications as we speak. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is another joint project being undertaken by all 7 municipalities, and our share for that will be between 15,000 and 19,000, but it's being led by the City of Stratford. And then the last one before I ask him up is the council dashboard, and Jessica's doing a lot of research on the best application to proceed with how we present the dashboard. Certainly I can answer any questions council has on my projects.
Councillors, any questions at this point in time? Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Chris, can you just talk to us a little bit further? My understanding is that both the city and the county had funding for the public transit for the inter and intra-regional. Is that right or not?
That's correct.
And North Perth is solely on the Stratford one in terms of the...
As far as financial contributions, the county has agreed to take on all the costs that would be incurred by any of the lower tiers for the county project.
And just further on that project then, where's how do these two projects mesh together?
So the two were awarded, or the two projects were actually under the same request for proposal, and it was anticipated and hoped that we would be picking a single provider for both projects, and I believe that's the direction that the recommendation is heading. And then we will work with the provider to make sure that the routes are meshed together as close as possible. Some of that detail is yet to be worked out, and we need to work that out with the provider. But certainly the inter route could be independent, but it will be a route from Listowel to Kitchener. But we do want the inter-regional model to feed those routes as well.
Okay, thanks very much. And I had another question. Are you going to go into the project sheets or?
I wasn't going to, but I can if you would like me to.
Well, the only question I have is on the question about the community-wide greenhouse gas emission reduction plan. I see the amounts in there, and what I'm concerned about is that, and I know that North Perth is the lead on this, but I don't see any income coming in from the 6 other partners. At least, not the way I read it.
Well, sorry. Bear with me. I'm trying to go paperless. Yes, that would be the other. I still can't find it. What number is it? Oh, perfect.
Oh, no, that's the GHG emissions.
Right. So that's it. So under sources of financing, the other is the contributions by the other municipalities.
Thank you. If anyone else, those are the 2019 capital projects, and those are carried over, right?
Yes.
My next question is just in terms of the administrative processes efficiency review for the 2020 capital project. Again, so we've submitted for funding. What happens if we don't get the funding?
At this time, the project would either be postponed or we would bring it back if we were to fund it without the ministry approval. And that's sort of what we're going to talk about even when Kim comes up, because since the budget's been prepared, we know we haven't got the red money. So in other years, basically those, unless we found funding from somewhere else, anything that involved 100% grant funding has been either postponed or brought back for a budget amendment.
Good, thank you. In terms of the commercial facade improvement project, are there any other municipalities that are doing CIPs that we could share that cost with?
So that's certainly a discussion we've been certainly willing to have around the CIP, but Kim will talk to that when she comes up, and we can fight that now if there's no other questions.
Last question, the last item, the council dashboard. In terms of our existing software, I thought that the software that we acquired, that we get our quarterly updates through you, Chris, I thought it had an element for both the public and council dashboard. Is this additional funding to open up a new section of that software, or is this a brand new piece?
So we haven't purchased the public dashboard with Invisio yet, but Invisio really is a project management software. And when we had the discussion around the dashboard at council, some of the items that were talked about were far beyond the project scope, so we are going to have to look at a much broader dashboard if we're going to sort of look at all the departments and sections that council want us to look at.
Good. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for CAO Snell before we invite Ms. Couch up? Okay. Kim, welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So there are a few different, or 4 projects that are presented before you this evening. The project number 8 is the carryover for the signage, which Chris addressed. We have, as Chris mentioned, we have recently been notified that the 2 red applications that were submitted were declined. We have had an opportunity, just last week we found out, we had an opportunity to have some good debriefing on the applications. Apparently, it was a very heavy round of applications. The one advisor indicated they haven't had that many applications in the 20 years she's been doing the program. So it was very competitive. They indicated that the applications were very strong, and the one area that did come out was that they wanted increased partnerships and increased in-kind or financial contributions from other partners. So at this point, that we did have support letters from other organizations in the community, and So that's kind of where we're at right now. As of last week, they also opened up another round of RED to be completed by February 24th. That's when the next one is due. The guidelines have not changed, and there are opportunities for us to look at both projects and resubmit if that's something that council would direct. But that, I mean, that's something, like that's an option. The other alternative would be to look at other potential projects that might also strategically align with the direction of council. So they do, I think it's really just the intent for council for us to know which direction you like to take. As of right now, the funds are covered within the operating budget for the streetscape revitalization project under their operating plan. The facade, because that is over it's a 2-year project, that's a 16-month project, that could also be covered. And we do also have reserve funds available, but that is part of that project is not covered or not eligible under RED, which is the grant portion itself, because they do not permit direction of funds. Part of that project is for a contracted staff. We're hoping for potentially someone with a planning background to be hired to assist and develop some of those guidelines and in developing the plan. And they would be doing more in-depth research as to the preferred type of program that we would like to use, whether it be a loan or grant or what type of program. Our CIP does account for a facade plan already, but we would just want to make sure it fit best with their needs. And the final project is for the Elma Logan development social space. When we did the youth attraction strategic plan, there was an element within that a common theme was a lack of social space for youth within the community. So this is an opportunity to address that, and it would also serve to help with attraction and integration of other groups within the community, including seniors and potentially newcomers.
Kim, let me follow up on Councillor Rothwell's question, which is comments about neighboring communities or others in the region that are currently funding a CIP that involves a facade or streetscape improvement.
We haven't recently surveyed other communities, but I know that in the last year, we have heard that other communities are doing the program and have been funded by RED for offering this within their communities. In Huron, I think North Huron had, and Minto has, and for most of those, it's not a grant, it's actually, or not a loan, it's actually a grant. So that's a different factor as well. But we would certainly be doing more to make sure that what we were offering was competitive.
So I think what I want to pick up here, just quickly if I might, is the sort of consolidated concept of these projects which have been put into our project's budget, dependent on, in whole or in part, on grants, and which, as Councillor Rothwell points out, if the grants don't come through, then what? What's our plan? And I think that staff would appreciate some direction from council on how we look at those projects. Do they die on this in this book, or are they put forward in another round in the case of RED for applications with a strengthened proposal based on the feedback we've had? I'm kind of open. I hope that that's part of the discussion we have at this point, just so that we can give Ms. Couch and the staff some guidance with respect to the February 24th deadline that lies ahead for the next intake of RED applications. So, councillors, I'd love to hear from you on your thoughts on this matter. Anyone want to jump in? Nobody. Dave, thank you.
I think we should apply for whatever staff thinks gives us our best shot.
Okay.
I'm not
I
sure
mean,
that
I did
answers any
ask them.
questions.
I actually did inquire whether there was any difference on success or their decision on the type of stream that we applied to, and they said no, that it was based on merit of the application itself, that it didn't matter whether it was the infrastructure stream or the implementation stream. But, I mean, again, we can look at, I mean, we're starting to look at those options, and we could see which one we had the better chance of being successful at.
Okay. So I think what we're hearing, what I've seen too, I've seen some of the details, is that both of these applications were strong and had merit, but they were lacking certain elements that others had in place, which included partnerships with other parts of their communities, so that they looked at sustainability as well and so forth, right? I think maybe the right question at this point to ask him is, do we think we can close some of the gaps that the response team identified as deficient in our proposal in time for the February 24th application intake?
It's possible. I think it will be tight,
Okay.
especially if we're pursuing both, because some of them are more detailed quotes on a couple of areas. It does depend on other groups if they're willing to partner, to be co-applicants or to partner. So there are a few variables in there.
Okay. Looks like CAO Snell has his hand up. You want to weigh in on this one, Chris?
So the streetscape parquet and planters project, I think, is the one we could probably most easily move forward with and sign up some partners in the short term. Although I think the commercial facade improvement project maybe has some longer term benefits as well. I think it's going to be tight, and maybe just picking up on Councillor Rothwell's statement, maybe we can actually look for some other partners inside of Perth County to pursue with that program in the future. I hope this isn't the last round of RED, but they don't tell us if there's going to be other rounds after this round. But it's been a program that's been around for some time, and I think we've got lots of projects that we could apply for in the future, including the commercial facade improvement project. But I think if we're looking for something that's maybe there's never a sure thing, but I think the streetscape parquet, I think we could probably round up more partners for it in the short term.
Okay. Councillor Andreessen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that these are two very different projects in many ways, and I would lean towards having more interest in the parquet project, as mentioned by Mr. Snell. I'm just concerned that we are committing to something fairly large if we don't get the funding. So not that these projects don't have merit, it's just, it's a big commitment financially that I would worry without the funding. I think we would need to have more discussions after that.
Okay. Thank you. Fran, did you want to weigh in? You're going to have to come to the microphone. Oh, give me that one.
One of the things that might be consideration is we do have a very active BIA in Listowel, and with the CIP, there might be some reciprocal projects that we could partner with them on this one and in turn partner with them on another one, such that it would be beneficial to the application and to moving both their agenda and our council's agenda forward. And that could be something that might be achieved in a short term with them, to be able to do that if that was your desire.
If in fact, let me ask him the question, do we believe that if we approached the BIA that this would be the kind of partnership that the province would look for in its applications for RED?
I think they would want it to be an in-kind or a financial commitment. I mean, we did submit a letter of support for both of those projects from the BIA.
Right.
So I think that they would be looking for
Something more.
in-kind or financial for that to be accepted. I do think for the facade program for long-term, that the BIA, I think, from my understanding, some of their budget is pretty committed for 2020, but for 2021, it might be something that they would be interested in partnering. But for them to commit in that, like in less than a month, that's pretty short.
Okay. I will concede that I agree with your comments that we're looking at sort of two different timelines here. I think that's a significant factor in looking at these two projects. One is sort of a reasonably quick win, I think, and the other is a long-term and potentially larger gain, but a much longer lifespan project too. Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Kim, have there been any conversations with West Perth with respect to Mitchell? I believe West Perth has a CIP, and the reason why I'm thinking about West Perth is, of course, in Moncton we split down the middle, and both these projects, both the facade improvement as well as the parquet and, the planters and so on, would be something that would be of mutual benefit. So if you haven't had conversation with West Perth, I'm going to suggest that you might want to have that conversation. Because, I mean, it's only a partial piece, but I think partial is better than none at all.
Certainly.
So Council, I don't know that we have to give really firm direction by resolution tonight, although I'll take the clerk's advice on this if we need it. But with regards to the red opportunity and the two applications that we've had turned back to us with very confident feedback, very thorough feedback, shall we leave it in staff's hand to decide how to proceed with that? And if they feel they can do one or both of those and line up the right kind of supports that we're good with letting them proceed? Does that seem reasonable? Terry? Okay. Neil? Okay, so gentle guidance then,
Great,
at your discretion. Do we need anything further with regards to those projects? Any further questions or comments? So the bigger question does remain, and maybe we let that play out a little bit further down the budget process road, which is if we don't receive certain funding for certain types of projects, then what do we do? Do we postpone them? Do we try to fund them from reserve or whatever, right? Okay. No further questions on that matter, General Administration. Then let's move to item 4.3 on the agenda, which is the Fire Department, according to the agenda. Welcome, Chief Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg, members of council. 2019 capital review, we replaced the support emergency response vehicle, the pickup truck. It has been put into service. Also, the RFP process for replacement of Unit 13, the tanker in the Listwell Station, and two pumper trucks, the Atwood Unit 22 and Moncton Unit 32, has taken place and was awarded, as council is aware, to Carrier Center Emergency Vehicles, which is the supplier for metal fab fire trucks, with Unit 13 and 22 arriving late in 2020 and 32 arriving in 2021. Also, the purchase and installation of gate and for the rear entrance and the fence for the northeast side of the lot has been completed at the Listwell Station, which was a health and safety issue. 2020 capital outlook, the North Perth Fire Department is looking at the following projects for capital purchase, which is receiving the first two trucks that were ordered in 2019. As you'll see, this is basically a carryover which was approved in 2019's capital budget to replace the three trucks, with the two trucks coming in 2020 and the third truck coming in 2021.
Councillors, any questions for Chief Smith? Pretty straightforward report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, I guess Councillor Rothwell has something.
One quick question through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Chief, for your comments. Now, not listed on here, is there a wish list of apparatus, fire apparatus that the stations have in terms of if donations came in separate from the municipality? Like if someone wanted to make a donation through to the fire department to acquire something, do you have a separate list of things that are on your, would like to have but not necessary?
What we normally have is we have an ongoing list for our, what we call our normal everyday equipment, which is in my operational budget. So if an organization decided they were going to donate us some money towards something, we would sit as a group and discuss what, you know, something that we may not normally purchase if they're interested in it or what they would like to see. Otherwise, in some cases, if we're donated, we'll take that money and put it towards something that we were going to purchase, and it helps offset the budget some. Then if that money isn't spent at that time of the year, we like to put it in reserve then for when we have a instance like when we replaced all our SCBA, when we do need extra funding, then the money's there to help carry that.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions for Chief Smith?
Thank you, Council.
That'll move us to item 4.4 on our agenda. That's tab 7 in the budget book. This is roads, bridges, stormwater, and drainage. And I'll call on Mr. Couch, our Manager of Operations, to lead us through those sections. Welcome, Lyndon.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg, members of council. I do have an addendum sheet that is something I can hand in. I wasn't sure if I'd already produced, but this is related to 3 different projects that are on the tabs for the new projects this year, so I'll go over those as we run through the tab. So looking at the summaries from last year, I won't go through every item in detail. The 2019 capital program completions are listed in the first grouping of bullets. Then we move to 2020 capital projects. Now, this is a summary and you've probably read through it, but the only thing I can say is that there's a contradiction in here because only in the last 2 weeks did we get full approval to do the Argyle pedestrian crossover. It's listed in here that approval was received. Later in the documents, you'll see that it says it was not approved at that time. The summary was done after the spreadsheet. So unless there's specific questions on this, we will, or should, address every item as we move through the tabs. And so moving to the first tab, Stormwater Levy Master Plan is a carryover project listed last year. There may be some inspection required. It's an additional amount of money of a few $1,000s that have been added in case stormwater facilities need to be inspected as part of that. So in talking to the consultants, that was a good idea to add it in case it's necessary. The next item is Project 2, Transportation Master Plan and Traffic items. There's a nested group of items in here. The master plan starts actually with meetings tomorrow. Company is awarded through council, Paradigm and GSP Group. We'll be working on that through 2020 with a report due up and recommendations and specific direction on things like alternate bypass, stop controls, traffic calming. All of those issues are going to be in there, and it's going to be very much married up with the official plan. It'll be a document we can turn to hopefully over the next few years. Related to it, $20,000 listed for traffic counts that could be added in as necessary to provide a really good idea as to what our primary, secondary, and tertiary roads are. And that'll be part of this plan, knowing exactly where our thoroughfares are, where our through streets should be. Third item is downtown core traffic flow review. There's a meeting with the key stakeholders tomorrow morning starting on that. It's listed for generally $25,000 in consulting fees and materials, and that's built into the totals. We're not sure how much change could happen at that core intersection in terms of construction and paint and signage, but these numbers should accommodate the recommendations that come out of this committee with implementation as early as April or May this year. So as I said, it starts up tomorrow with a meeting with GSP Group.
Why don't I hold you there? Okay, so I think what I'll do is we'll do this in parts, all right, Lyndon? We'll go a couple projects at a time and give council a chance to ask questions at appropriate intervals. So it looks like the deputy mayor has a question. No, okay. Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, thanks, Lyndon, for the comments. I just want to confirm from what I see, all three of these carryover projects are all totally funded through development charges. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Councillors, any further questions about these first three? Okay, next up.
Okay, so we're on 4 Kincaid. The project is expected to be tendered out in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Kincaid is one that is listed on your addendum list. The overall price of Kincaid listed right here at $565,000 does not change at all. What this recommendation from staff is to go ahead and purchase the actual light controller products now. It's about a 10-week delivery, up to 10 or 11-week delivery on the components. If we can order now, then when the tender is awarded, hopefully by the beginning of March, there's a jump start on that and the project can get started and obviously completed in a quicker fashion. We do use Econolite for all of our controllers, the newest being the Trail, second newest being Elizabeth, oldest being Main Street, and then this would be state-of-the-art with some radar detection for cars, etc. No loops in the road. Looking at a cost estimate of $71,000 and the motion, I'm not sure if we would take this motion now. The clerk can advise on that or whether we wait till the end, but the motion in front of you would be to accept this as a sole source now.
Okay, let's intervene at this point then. We'll take care of that. Lyndon, I have a question for you. I saw at the Accessibility Advisory Committee a recommendation pertaining to this intersection as well that I'm wondering if it has been considered related to a newer technology for those with disabilities to trigger the light or something to that effect and not to rely on buttons or mounted things on light standards. Can you tell me where that sits?
They actually reviewed, we worked with the county accessibility coordinator in reviewing the design. It's up to AODA and MTO standards for audible signalization as well, like the other intersections for the PXOs that we've been putting in place, so it meets all of the new regulations on that, yes. In fact, there were some suggestions about some tests we could run with the auxiliary technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Apps.
Yeah.
And we can add those to the system that we're putting in place, but this place is, meets all the guidelines, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to see if we were considering conducting the pilot that was suggested to us by the county's Accessibility Advisory Committee.
Asked the engineering firm and they said it looks like it's compatible, but we'll determine that through the install period. Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Lyndon, the amounts that are coming from development charges are specifically listed and separately segregating surplus and such, but are there not any funds coming in from Nickel Properties and Sugar Bush Developments to pay for this traffic as a result of the subdivisions on the west side, as well as the previous, like the original Nickel Property subdivision? There was a requirement for signalization here at some point, so I don't see where, unless I'm misreading, that we're getting dollars for this project from the developers as well.
Yeah, previously under the site application and the agreement that we had for the Pioneer application, there was a component in that funded this, and it's nested in this number. The DC charges was a calculation that was done through finance as well, and it would represent the other properties that are developing in the area, but I would certainly welcome a comment from the Director of Finance if that's
the estimate,
okay.
The 50%.
Okay.
Sorry, did you want to? Yeah.
So if I may, like the development charges bylaw is specific in terms of the DCs for that commercial lot and those lots for the residential and so on. So are we saying that for this project, the DCs are specific for from those developments, or is this the overall DCs in all of North Perth that are covering this? All right, so then my last question is then, is there not separate funding that's coming from Nickel Properties in terms of this development?
The large,
subdivision?
Well, I can say on the west side, in particular, which is the one that's, which they sold to, Nickel Properties was the developer and Sugar Bush is the one that developed it. And then Nickel Properties is the one that sold the land to the Pioneer Gas Bar, and so on. And also then if we go back far enough, Trillium Insurance was also part of that conversation in terms of signalization. So that's where my question's coming from. Were there not funds gathered from those developments to help offset the required signalization?
So there was funds gathered from the agreement we had with Pioneer, what that development went through as part of the site plan process, which is more than because there's no commercial DCs except for on the hard services such as water and sewers. So, but the other, to my knowledge, there was no funds paid by Trillium Mutual. That was certainly done an agreement prior to my arrival, but there was nothing in that agreement. And the Nickel subdivision, be it Sugar Bush or the rest of the residential property, will pay the regular development charges. But there's no separate traffic signalization as part of that agreement, which we haven't signed yet, I don't think, with the outstanding Nickel.
I'll ask a follow-up here, just for council's benefit and more particularly for me. Is it common that you can strike signalization agreements in these kind of projects so that the municipality gains funds directly from the developers or owners of those properties for these kind of targeted improvements that really do represent improvements in their neighborhood, in their area, and probably driven by their business needs?
So I've seen development charges collected two ways. One, in the general overall development charges, which is how we did this in the last study, or I've seen area-specific development charges, which can lead to amenities just in that general area. But when we went through this with the consultant last time, it was felt to be a general intersection, and that should be collected across the whole municipality.
Sure. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understood what tools and policies are available to us, so that I get a sense of the answer to that question. My colleagues do as well. Further questions or comments here? Councillor Seiler.
Just a question. We took this connecting link over how long ago, Chris? How many years?
2016.
So before that, it was belonged to the province. So those talks then.
So there's a little bit of the historical reference to this intersection. When the Trillium site was developed, the municipality of North Perth signed an agreement with MTO to put signalization at this intersection. The MTO actually has been very patient because the light should have been in there a long time ago, according to that agreement. So we've been working with the MTO like I said, they've been very patient with us.
Okay. One follow-up, Councillor.
Thanks very much. That explains my question.
Okay.
Clearly. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks. Okay. I have a resolution that has been put before us to address Mr. Couch's comments about purchasing the equipment. The resolution draft reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receive updated quotations from Econolite Canada and approve the single-source purchase of traffic control equipment as listed in the Kincaid Street intersection tender specifications at an estimated cost of $71,000. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Duncan, thank you. And Deputy Mayor Kellum. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, by show of hands, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. Next up.
Just for clarification, was Project 3 Albert Storm Trunk not discussed? Because it's one of the larger items on the list here.
It's not all development charges.
No. Right. So we know that this has evolved out of the Binning Street reconstruction to a much larger project. with new pricing. I would also add that we've had a secondary review of the storm catchment area, the design of the sewers, and also the assumptions that were made in the design, and verified that we're absolutely on the right track in terms of building up our storm infrastructure, and that the design is certainly good and good to go. In fact, today the tender went live and is available for contractors, and we've already had interest previously on this job. We hope that it would start as early as a May start. This will cross Main Street. This will be a big project that's timed out with the other projects and have quite an impact on traffic. We'll do a lot of signage, a lot of detour advertising, a lot of media on the project as well as it moves through the town from north to south. I would also say that although we've been asking the Ministry of the Environment, or MOEC, for approval, we have not received that. It was asked for in August. It was confirmed they received it in September. We again have spoken to them in January. We don't see any problem, and typically they don't have any comment, but we're waiting for that approval still, and we hope it comes before tenders close in 4 weeks. So that's the Albert Street Storm project.
I'll stop you there because it is a big project in the life of this community. Councillor Duncan has a question.
It says in the project sheet there's going to be some front yard servicing for several properties north of Edgar. Those properties never had servicing before, I take it?
Yeah, this is a real benefit, but it is an expansion of this, and one of the reasons the price has gone up is because they have rear yard surfacing in an antiquated old line. Obviously, we want to get out of the rear yards. We do not have an opportunity to do that except during this construction, so if we're going to be digging in the area, we're bringing those lines forward. It allows us to also tie in sidewalk and better infrastructure and lower the profile of the road as we go up there to Rogers Road and extend sidewalk into the new subdivision. So it's going to connect a brand new developing area. We know that there's two 10-plexes. That area is really going to get busy for pedestrian traffic. This allows the sanitary connections and sidewalks.
So supplement to that, will there be a cost to those residents then for those new front yard servicing?
There's our standard connection fees that we'll be applying to the residents. We did have an open house. I know some of the residents were there, and we communicated that to them back last year when this program was first launched. So yeah, it'd be covered under our standard fees.
That was my concern, that these residents knew that there was going to be some cost to having this front yard servicing.
And point taken, we can advise them again specifically as we move into it here in the next month.
Okay.
If I may, just a quick question to follow up on this. What is the scope of those charges? Like, off the top of your head, how big, how much are people going to have to pay?
$5,000 connection for sanitary, $5,000 connection for water. It depends whether they're getting one or both, and I can't recall whether all 4 units are getting both, but we can look that up, and certainly we'll communicate that back with them.
And do we have a process or means to amortize that over time so that those people aren't hit with a $10,000 bill all at once?
Yeah, we can consider that in an agreement. The existing rear yard line won't be disconnected, and we could put a window or a clause in that would say over a certain amount of time that they should make a connection, but we'll certainly be providing the stubs to the property line for connection, so in the future, if they chose to connect, it wouldn't rip up the infrastructure in the future. So we'll work that out through finance as we go through the project with the owners. Yep. Okay,
thank you. I just want to be sensitive to the financial pressures that this could place on some homeowners. Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Lyndon, through you mentioned about the sidewalks on that east side of Albert, where we have had development, fair bit of development on that east side. Now, will the developers not be responsible for installation of the sidewalk at their expense or not?
Yeah, we took securities on both of the site plans, the frontage on the laneway and then the larger one to the north.
Good, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Further questions, councillors, on the Albert Street project? Okay, next up.
Okay, over to pedestrian crossovers, page 5. So we've installed on Elizabeth, and we've already had some discussion about this. We have received that approval for Argyle. There's some additional infrastructure, old water main. We'll get to this when we talk about the core, and some other repairs that we have to do. So that's looking around the $75,000 mark for the installation of it's new posts, lights, signalization, maybe replace a bit of water main and storm sewer, and new curbs and ramps there. As well, there's additional possible construction of PXOs or school crossings in the southern part of, we've been working with school boards in the southern part of Listowel to put in additional sidewalk to make connecting pedestrian ways for students to walk to school. We know that there's, upwards of 50 students that are already on what we'll call the west side of Wallace South. So crosswalks or some method of dealing with that has already been discussed with the school boards, and we'll be looking at possible installation this year, and there's been some money earmarked for that in the $134,000.
And sorry, this is a result of some busing changes that will be taking place because of school boundary adjustments. So those children are not walking at present, but by next September will be. So again, one of the issues of a growing community is as school boundaries change, school pedestrian traffic patterns change as well. So we have had a very productive meeting with the school boards.
Great, thank you. Questions on this one?
Bridge, we call it 081, 081 on line 81. What's listed here in front of you is the remainder of costs that would be attributed to finishing the bridge, and that's the budget line that we see. We've had some discussion in closed sessions with council about the progress of that, and we've been working with the company in terms of getting a submission on moving forward as quick as possible, and we'll provide further updates on it, but that's the budget line for that project. 911 street installation. Those signs may come in within the next 3 to 6 weeks from what I understand, and this is simply earmarking the time it's going to take to do the locates, organize the signs, the posts, do all the installs, and replace the 911 signs in North Perth. It's a lower tier, upper tier coordinated project for this year. Atwood servicing upgrades, Project 8. We'll actually be talking with the MTO tomorrow. We'll also be trying to schedule a meeting on it's February 11th or 12th to discuss their commitment to this project in terms of it being a single-year project that would happen in 2021, where we could install a water main in advance of their resurfacing the entire area and probably doing curb work and sidewalk work. At the same time, there'll be upgrades in terms of the burying, hopefully, of hydro wires and removal of some poles. The widening of boulevards, likely parking on one side will be determined, and they'll provide some cross sections that I can provide to council. But this job actually is trying to rush itself along in terms of being ready for next year. There are many utilities in the way, and we've been having utility coordination meetings to try and make it all work out with the MTO. Hopefully the meeting happens in the beginning of February and they get it on their budget line items. I put most of the preliminary costs that we understand in next year's budget with continued engineering and design work and coordination with the ministry in this year's budget. It's mentioned that there is funding potentially available for the fire suppression as part of this job. It would also connect to the new subdivision, so the timing actually couldn't be better. If we got the funding for the project, it would be a win for all parties. Although it's not a partnership, we're certainly coordinating with the MTO.
It looks like the CAO would like to weigh in. Go ahead, Chris.
So certainly the big change of this project is the potential for us to actually offer fire suppression to the village. It really fit nicely with the Greenstream ICIP grant that the province required us to submit in January. Staff had a lot of discussions with both the developer and the fire department, and we looked at opportunities to see how we could provide fire suppression to the village. We thought it was essentially unattainable given the current state of our infrastructure, but then the ICIP grant came along, as well as council's seen, we would no longer need the need to bury a tank in the new subdivision. So if we're successful, I think this is a great project for the village that we can actually get not just potable water to the village, but also have fire suppression available for the future. for other additional growth that may come along as well.
Shall we pause at that one and see if there are questions in the last couple? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much. And perhaps I missed it, Mr. Mayor, through you. When are we expecting a decision from the province on the Green Stream funding?
That's to be determined. We have a meeting in the beginning of February with them again to go over the project. They understand the timeline and they know the need for us to get a tender out. They also understand the conflict that could potentially happen with construction happening in the same year. Although they understand the concept, there's been no agreement and no budget passed by the province, but they're bringing it through their team, and we have another team meet in February with them.
I think your question, though, was targeted to the Green Stream application and whether we know what the notice.
The Green Stream is what I'm asking. Like, is it the ICIP then? Is it a different funding type program where there's an open window and there's no strict deadline like we're anticipating for the other two funding projects in particular we've got for the Atwood Library and the North Perth Library / Community Hub?
Chris, did you want to take that one?
So the Green Stream was the fourth phase of the ICIP. Again, the province has said they're going to move on these fairly quickly, but we're still waiting on the third phase that we applied for. So we're hoping that with the MTO internal pressure to make sure this gets through, that we'll be through early, but we'll be up against it because the recreation and culture stream was closed in October, and we haven't heard anything yet.
Thank you. Any further questions on these projects? Okay, next ones.
Okay, tab number 9. 84 was listed last year for design work. We also had a funding application under ICIP for that project that was not successful. However, it aided in getting all the survey work done and some of the design work done as well. It is expected to be out for tender and award in March. This construction project has to time out with Albert Street's crossing of Main Street and wouldn't start until after the first week of July and be concluded probably by November. The project has also expanded west of Highway 23 to include commercial development that's happening out there and cost sharing with those landowners in terms of providing water, fire suppression, etc. To those locations. At this point, it says could extend to the wastewater treatment plant, but our designs right now, and in consultation with the environmental services staff, it would not. We would have it stubbed and ready to go, but it would stop at New Life Mills to the west.
We'll come back. Let them do another one.
Okay. 10, the core infrastructure upgrades. We did a fairly good assessment of the infrastructure that was not in the best condition in terms of an asset rating. We'll get you those, but we do know that resurfacing the entire area of Main Street, probably Argyle to Elizabeth, is not a good idea because of the potential of infrastructure failure and having to make repairs as well. The curb lines, etc., the sidewalks are not in good enough condition to pave up to and leave. This is part of an overall plan looking at the core, but also looking at the underground works over the next few years. So what this does is it takes a look at the previous streetscape design. It looks at how we phase the upgrades, when we phase the upgrades, and provides more current estimates on the construction project itself. So it's on probably a 5-year to 10-year capital plan, and it would meet as well with our strategic plan in terms of what we're doing with the core list well. So this is ongoing work. We'll be talking about what we do with asphalt in the core later on in the short term.
Okay, why don't we have questions on those two at this point then? Questions or comments? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Lyndon, line 84, if we can just go back to there again. Can you just refresh my memory, and I guess council, is there going to be an oversized shoulder, or was there a separate sidewalk area that was going to be incorporated as part of that? I can't recall.
It was originally proposed that between Wallace Street and the trail, we could put a 3-meter multi-use trail in. At this point, there simply is not the land size there. We're working with a 4-meter lane and a 2-meter paved shoulder on the north side through that area. So there'll be quite a wide shoulder area that is paved and delineated that could be used for pedestrian and accessible corridor.
So again, just to clarify, that's only from Wallace west to Mr. Road South of 23, correct? I believe you're probably aware there's a lot of people that are using line 84 for walking and so on, not just from Wallace west of the trail, but also Wallace east to Tremaine. I'm just concerned from public safety standpoint if that we're going to be looking at reconstructing that road house, we should do something to address pedestrian safety at least on one side of the road. I'm glad to hear that we are doing it on from Wallace through to the trail at least, but I am concerned on the east side.
We're looking at that 2-meter paved shoulder to extend from basically LTI right through to Wallace, where we've seen as we monitor it, we did counts, and it's because the trail is there where the highest demand of pedestrian traffic is people walking to work. This will go directly into the transportation master plan in terms of what we do and what the future could hold. So as we see those areas develop, and I'm talking on the west side, the lands that aren't developed, potentially we could ask the development, or we would ask the development to put in wide sidewalk as well to connect that area. To the east, simply a wide road with wide shoulders at this point as it crosses at the factories. We have a 20-meter allowance. We're not going to disrupt the possibility of future work or land acquisition that could see sidewalk or trail added, but at this point it's just road.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, 2-meter shoulders again.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Further questions on those two projects? Okay. Next up.
Okay, so Project 11, stormwater infrastructure upgrades, that's carry forward on Richmond. We did half of that work. We are still working with easement issues with the landowners and hope to see those resolved. And it's planned for the continuation and finalization of bringing a storm through that area into what is Richmond. We're working with the school as well as they develop their addition and the stormwater works that would extend behind the church and then also continue along our old rail corridor. That money is earmarked at $17,000 for upgrades, and that is stormwater improvement for the area. Tab 12, asphalt resurfacing program. Okay, this is listed on your addendum as well. What I will do is asphalt double chip and seal preservation, 4,000 meters. That's an estimated 2 blocks of chip and seal or slurry seal, which would help to seal a cracking road that still has a good crown profile and preserve it for some time. We have some sections earmarked. We want the contractors to come in and take a look at them before we apply that and do that work. So that's planned for this year. We've also listed Park Meadow Place because of the build-out is complete for asphalt resurfacing top lift, and it's listed at $65,000. The total there would have the amount of $53,000 added, and that's getting back to the core again. Because we know it's in reasonable condition, but the infrastructure is needing full repair, milling, and doing a lift of asphalt in the traveling lanes from the main intersection north to Inkerman could be added. The estimated price for that is $53,000, and that would be a good short-term solution in that area to provide a better traveling surface just on the through lanes of that block. And I know many of you had many complaints about it, and that would be a solution, again, taking us into what we would call the big rebuild in the core.
Councillors, any questions on this? One hates to spend money and then spend money again in short order, but it is clear to me at least that there is a lot of growing concern about the Wallace North from Maine to Inkerman. There's equal concern. 1 block west of that on Argyle, I think it's starting to really deteriorate as well. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you for adding that. I think that's had so many people mention that the intersection is just brutal right down, and I know it's not spending good money after bad, but I think this is very good money for the time being because it's the busiest intersection that we have, and it's just absolutely dreadful to go over. And if we have to dig it up in a few years when we do the full core replacement, then so be it. And we, for the cost of 53, excuse me, not being flippant with money, but for the convenience and the maintenance and everything else that would add, we've probably spent money worse ways that we need to do that, even if it gets dug up again. It's an absolute necessity and has to happen.
Do we believe we can get on that early in the construction season? Any hunches?
Yeah, we can. That would stand alone as work that we could quote out now. You know, pending budget approval, we could quote that out and then get that work conducted in early summer. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan.
I just have a question. The chip seal rural urban mix, is Road 176 on that list, Lyndon?
Well, not this year, but it would be. Road 176, we're going to take a look and see if it continues to move, meaning it doesn't have a very good base. We are really debating whether we put an overlay over that road. If it continues to move and crack, then we're in trouble. We infilled all the rutting, and yes, that would be the finish we'd like to put on top of it. The other problem with that road is with the expansion in the feed mill, etc., you know, we may have to look at a bit of a widening of the asphalt surface and a full rebuild. So short term, it doesn't look pretty. It's patched up, but it's a better traveling road than it was. We could do a chip and seal on it. It wouldn't be planned in this year, but it could be. We'd like to see how it moves and how this work that we did last year holds.
Okay. Just from what I've witnessed, some of that work is already starting to come off of that road. So we may have to do some more maintenance on that road this summer before the year's over.
We're definitely planning on doing more maintenance on it. And again, it does come back to that fact about, you know, we got about a 6.5 meter wide platform. You know, it's fairly narrow. If we put a lift on top of it, it gets just a little bit more narrow, and it's tight shoulders. It's one of those roads that we really have to look at in terms of a larger, more expensive project of probably rebuilding it and widening it slightly.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Kasenberg, speaking with Councillor Seiler earlier, with regards to Project 11 with Davidson, will that, with the concerns we had in the last 3 weeks, will that help eliminate the concerns we had?
I'm sure you'll have to explain the concerns.
So when we had that major flood, there were like 7 backyards that were underwater.
This area actually did not experience any significant problems, but it is an area that's earmarked because the pipes are not in good condition. We videotaped them, and we know that it's an area that we want to do an upgrade to. Those other problems that you've mentioned, we've listed those, and they would be separate items as we move through the year that we'll have to do a little bit more diagnosis on, to be honest with you, in terms of talking with the residents and looking at what's available.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions on those? Okay, that brings us to Project 13, I believe.
Okay, 13 is fleet improvements or fleet upgrades and replacement. Obviously, the grinder is, you know, some machines that are in quite state of disrepair. The grinder needs to be fully replaced. It's a small walk-behind unit that we do all of our tow trippers and sidewalk work with, $5,500. The tractor loader is an interesting one. Very old loader, was basically only used for grass cutting. It has basically no heat and no air conditioning in it. It's not that there's a problem. What's a problem with the machine is it doesn't travel quickly. We've rented a machine at about $4,000 to $6,000 a year to do the shoulder cutting quicker with a better machine that's more stable. So that's what this represents. It's a replacement with a larger machine. The other thing we have to look at, and I'll be quick about this, this could become a machine that does winter work and especially blows snow. We're losing our contractors due to insurance issues. It's something that's not our problem, it's everybody's problem, and we have to start looking at beefing up our fleet to do a little bit more in-house, and we have no ability to move snow. Right now we only truck with loaders. It's a slow process. It's a costly process. You can put a lot more snow with a blower into a truck, so that's what we'll be pricing. The 2 pickup trucks, the supervisor pickup is in poor condition. It's an 09, needs to be replaced and would be sold, removed from the fleet. The office truck, although it's in good condition, we have a very, very old truck at the landfill that's currently used and is in a state of disrepair and needs to be replaced with something that's in better condition. So that would cascade over there. We'd replace the other unit, keeping it in the fleet. Now the next item is the 3719 Alma Plow Sander combo. This is the same situation. We retained one old sander as a backup unit. Basically, we had contracted out work to the Murray Group this year, but they were unable to fill the machine with an operator on a consistent basis, and we have been backfilling that with our own operations and splitting the contract machines out of Listowel down into Atwood and Moncton. We do need the backup unit. Same problem. We're not sure if we're going to have any contractors available like we have in the past, and this will enable us to have a better backup and a new truck that was scheduled to be replaced regardless. It's listed at $295. The Graco line painter, another small unit, we do all our line painting with it. It's quite an old unit. Needs to be replaced with a more up-to-date one that there's glass bead that feeds into these machines, and the feeder is not working as well. The final item is one that's actually in a state of progress, and the manager of environmental services has been working with the repair company on this, and some of these monies have been earmarked. I don't know if they're spent at this point, but this represents significant repairs to the compactor. It's an older machine as well, scheduled probably in the next few years for replacement, but this will buy us those 2 years to keep it on the garbage, compacting the garbage, and then replace the unit. And that's, in summary, the fleet replacements.
Do you want to give us the next one too, and then we'll...
Project 14 is Road 140. I think everyone here knows that we've been an ongoing program. It looks like it's going to go for another 2 to 3 years to get us down to the southern part of North Perth. And this just represents the payment for this year of the ongoing work.
Okay. Questions about those two projects? Councillor Duncan.
Just wondering about the Elma Plow Sander combo. Is that a tandem truck, Lyndon?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Any further questions on those two? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. Through you. This is more of a point, even though our procurement bylaw has been in place for a number of years, and I totally understand, just referring to the pickups, that when they go out for tender, I'm only asking that, is there a way, because nothing grinds the gears, like some of the big ticket items, people will talk to you, oh, that's how much a grader is, okay, that's fine, they don't, but when all of a sudden it raises the ire of everyone when you buy it, and I know they don't necessarily understand the procurement process and how it saves it, and 2% makes a big difference, but is there any way for dollars saved or whatever to incorporate into the tender package to not necessarily insure it to a local truck dealer, which the rates are very competitive, but including some yearly service that maintains the locality of it, that would be included into the tender as well, that for, the tender must include, you pick up for oil changes and do this, that, and the other tire rotations, replacement muffler bearings or something like that. I'm not saying anything untoward, but I'm just saying something that it's much more conducive and easier for a local dealership to do than a Ford dealer from Vaughan. Because you want to take some heat for that. And we don't care if it's $500 or $1,000. Spend it here. They support this, and trying to explain, well, the 1% doesn't make a difference. It makes a difference on the truck, but 1% you'd squeal a lot more if it was for a $5 million project to go to the cheapest tender. Just a thought to end the tendering process, spec to spec, maybe include some service as well, that it's a little more favorable to a local dealer.
Because we have all the big automotive companies represented in Listowel, the servicing and the warranty work stays in town. It makes good sense. It's simply the best bang for our buck. As far as procurement goes and the Municipal Act talk, we have the Director of Finance that can talk to us about that. We did have those unfortunate circumstances that were shared over the last 2 years where we had joint purchases, and I've never seen anything like it. I've been at it for 25 years and done joint purchases and done many purchases, but not seen the kinds of problems we saw over those last 2 years, and they happen to be the joint works. I would honestly stand in front of you and say I would go into a joint purchase again tomorrow. Not sure that's going to happen. We'll probably be buying independently this year, but we heard your comments, and I'll be working with the Finance Department on the proper procurement that we have in the municipality.
And I get that, but you can understand my point.
Yes.
Good ideas.
Have the same conversations.
Something that is not profitable, like especially if you must maintain and deliver a pickup, or Hudson's or Listowel Ford or Listowel Chrysler or somebody like that, or Buster's could easily do that, or someone from Vaughan. That's not, takes them right out of the running, doesn't matter if it's cheaper or not, as long as it's with compliance with provincial law and our procurement law. Nothing shady by any means, I don't mean that, but if there's some value added that could be put into there, because
For sure.
the councillors, especially when it comes to pickup trucks and given the nature of, the old moniker of Car City, nothing can,
Right.
it just grinds people the wrong way. Sorry.
Yep.
CO Snell.
Excuse me. Now, one of our local vendors was successful on a county-wide pickup truck purchase, which was probably as many pickup trucks as what maybe North Perth would have bought over a 10-year period, and they were successful in the full county-wide pickup. So, although I do certainly understand what Councillor Richardson is saying, one of our local dealerships was successful in a county-wide tender process of several pickup trucks.
Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Linda. Just while we're talking about procurement of trucks and so on, I heard your comment regarding the possibility of not going on the joint tender process for that. Is there any particular reason?
I've asked the question of the group of managers, and I haven't heard responses back. We usually talk about all the machinery that we want to procure. I believe no one else is getting a tandem plow truck, so we'll be on our own in that one. Haven't heard back on the pickup trucks. But as I said, we'll be looking for that kind of synergy, and we'll see if we can get it. CAO might have a comment.
Go ahead, CO still.
So as Lyndon has described, the last year in particular was difficult with the pickup truck order when it was a joint tender, and I certainly tried to express that we need to work through this, but some of the other member municipalities are very reluctant to look at another pickup joint tender at this time, just because of the difficulties we went through last year. So hopefully that can be resolved, and we're discussing it at the CIO table, but that certainly is the hesitation.
Thank you. With regards to line 140, or road 140, sorry, can you tell us, does this project end in 2021? Is that the final year of planned construction?
No, from my understanding, it's going to go probably for 2 to 3 more years as we reach down the next 8 kilometers, with about 2 kilometers being done a year.
Okay.
For its completion, getting to the south end of the municipality. It's part of the boundary agreement, yet it's broader than that because it's a capital program for a full rebuild. We're trying to get a 9-meter wide platform that would support obviously a 7.5 to 8 meter road, and could potentially become a paved road at some time with extra widening.
Thank you. That's where I was going to go next. There's certainly a lot of interest in seeing 140 paved.
So yeah, they've become experts at it. Actually, the operators are excellent getting the black muck base out at the bottom of the trench and replacing with the existing B gravels and other granulars, then adding more B and more A, and it's making a perfect platform for an asphalt road at some point. Although it might have to be widened, the base is in good shape for those 9 meters we're putting in.
Thank you. Further questions or comments on these two? Let's move on to the next one then.
Okay, under bridge and culverts for new projects, there's 2 smaller structures, one in 154 that was listed last year as a carryover. We'll look at design work on this structure, and then there's one on line 60 as well. You can see the bulk of the repairs, and all the repairs are listed in 2021 with engineering design and tender preparation in this year only. The OSIM reports were done last year. We're awaiting the final report. If there's any updates on what they find, although there's no red flags, we'll bring those forward. This should be the only thing on that list. Sidewalk plan and installation. Item number 16 does have an addended item on this. Similar to Park Meadows asphalt, the sidewalk can go in as well. We have an estimated amount of $28,700 that would be added to this list of sidewalks for this year, and could be added to the tendered items to finalize that development, put in proper tactile plates and proper corners, and upgrade that area. And it is near the school, so it's timely to do that. The other sections are still to be determined, in terms of our meetings with the school and how they lay out the way they are transporting people. We want to add some sections in that with the remaining $50,000.
Questions on those? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Lyndon. So I can assure you the school board is excited to hear the news about this, and this has been a fair bit. I know there's more than just one section, but Binning, for example, has been talked about for a long time in terms of the sidewalk. I mean, the school's been there for going on 4 years now, and it was always anticipated that the sidewalk was going to be completed by then. So, I mean, I think for public safety, this is a crucial matter, and I think that would be wonderful to see that move forward. What I'm concerned about is the other section here regarding our conversation about Park Meadow Place. Did the municipality take over that subdivision without the subdivider actually completing the project in terms of their requirements in the subdivision agreement for the second list of asphalt?
Again, we're listing it because of the completion of the subdivision and needing to do the works. We've been asking those questions and we're researching it.
So I can confirm that this developer provided us funding for both the second lift of asphalt and sidewalk.
Okay, thanks very much. I would hope that was the case. I just didn't see that on the project sheet, so I feel much better now. Thank you.
Okay, listed under that.
Okay.
Well, good news for us then. Thanks.
Any further questions on that, Councillor Anstead?
So, Mayor Kasenberg, through you. Sorry about my voice. I got a bit of a cold. Lyndon, do you know what sidewalks? Do you have a list of which ones they'd be doing for that sidewalk plan? Like what streets?
Right now, there's a section of sidewalk that would be missing as we go up Albert Street to Rogers Road. The development is going to take us to Albert at Edgar, and then beyond that, there are site plans that are going to bring sidewalk across the frontages, but we need to extend a large section north on Albert. That's listed right now. We're looking at some sidewalk in some areas on the Anger Street area where there is none, and several school bus stops. And we've also listed Park Meadow Place. There's a northern portion of Nelson Street that has no sidewalk on either sides. Very busy out by the malls, and that is being considered as part of this as well. We haven't done full locates, so we're not certain we can put sidewalk in that block, but that's the other one that's on the list right now.
Thanks. And that's the new sidewalks. What about the repairs? Do you have lists of priority areas for that?
We'll go around and we'll walk every sidewalk in all the three jurisdictions we got, Listowel, Moncton, and Atwood. Look to adding. We'll defer. We'll either do grindings and minimal repair when we know we have to do full replacement. And then where we do full replacement, it'll usually be up to 10 panels, and it'll be spots throughout Moncton, Atwood, and Listowel. And that eats up a lot of concrete. As well, I would have to say that some of this might even go into that core intersection if we need to do some additional work as we look at that this year.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions about that?
Okay, so the Northeast Master Plan is listed, and it's the upgrades to Walton Street that have been already put forward through the master plan, which is not finalized, but hopefully finalized through the middle part of this year, and then a pump station on Davidson. So this is very preliminary estimates, but it needs to be represented just in terms of our strategic planning and having it listed for finance as a project next year and on the books for all of us to remember. We could move forward into the next category, which is a couple items for the cemetery. The new columbarium installation is again a carryover. I think there's going to be some necessary additional fees to what they quoted us last year. We found some difficulty in getting the products over from China because of taxes and tariffs and those issues. We'll order early this year, and price may go up slightly, and it's represented here. We'll also tender out the installation of the base of the columbarium, and do the install through the summer months. So that's the first item, project number 1 under cemeteries. The next item is again a carryover with an additional. It's the carryover of the signs which were tendered and ordered, and I believe are fabricated and will be delivered and installed in the spring at the 2 cemeteries, Woodlawn and Shipley. And then there's also the additional need for the cemetery office. The board discussed this, to have a branded wayfinding sign that shows the office location. We currently don't have a sign. Many people ask. This is an excellent opportunity to add one that suits the rest of the municipality.
Okay, I saw Councillor Barron's wave her hand earlier. Did you want to jump in here, Julie?
About the cemetery. It's going back to roads and bridges. And I think you probably know what I'm going to say. $13 million for 2020, but I don't see any actual rural roads. And I know we've discussed some of the deficits in the rural roads, both in Elma and in Wallace. Are we awaiting the master plan? Like I heard a off-the-cuff comment about wanting to pave Road 140 that we don't even have constructed yet. But like, where are the traffic counts? Like, we can't keep throwing stuff like that out there because we can't keep paving roads for the sake of paving them, and I understand that because we can't maintenance them. But my concern is the lack of, there's really no rebuilding of road in the rural wards or anything like that. And I guess, like I said, are we waiting for the master transportation plan to kind of show us a grid, or what are we waiting for?
Not waiting for anything. The pavement index that was calculated showed the rural roads between 70 and 80%. 70 and 80% might be too narrow, might be considered too high from some perspectives, but in terms of the surface condition of most of the roads, reasonable to good. That's what came back from that study. So we did that in 2017, and that was done through Golder and Associates as part of that work. So that's been done. The roads that we've done, and we've had a fairly aggressive program with over $500,000 going into 158 and originally to line 87 as well, the padding job we did and all the fiber mat work that happened in 16 as well. So this year, those pavement preservation techniques are looking at some of the roads that are in a little bit better condition. And by way of example, although we're not sure this is the one, if you take Tremaine 158 out of town, south of 84, you can see that although it's a new road, it's cracking. We crack sealed it, we tried to repair it. There are slurry seals and chip seals that we can put on that road to try and preserve it. So we're trying to keep the better roads in good shape for longer, and then the old roads may have to deteriorate a little bit further and get patched before we do a pulverization and repave like we did over the last 2 years.
Okay, just supplemental, Lyndon, I wasn't specifically just talking paving. You know that some of our gravel roads are, well, like I'm going to use Elma. There's some roads in Elma that aren't necessarily passable in the spring. Is there a plan or something that we're going to do for a little bit of reconstruction on some of those roads?
Yeah, there is actually the additional funds that came in last year and that we also have this year for rebuild. We put extra material actually on those sections to try and beef them up. Let's see what happens this spring. Last spring was better. These are small sections that could use potential rebuilds. And I will be honest with you, as far as the effort that we put into that and the amount of crew time it takes to do a rebuild, a dig and rebuild, it all goes to 140. And I think that's a decision that was made before I came here, but that rebuild effort is $250,000 a year, and it's all going to Road 140. If you had the $250,000, you could do several sections, small 100 to 200 to 300 meter sections, and do the same kind of rebuild. But what we could look at is proposing to add that onto the capital list for the future. We've identified some of these sections. We do know that most of these roads are very low use, and it's only a short duration where we're in trouble with them. But the crowning that we're doing and the additional material we're putting on is actually making all those sections better as well.
And I would agree with you with you correcting the crowning on the gravel roads. They are looking like they're maintaining a better shape. But I was unaware that we said that we would only put $500,000 into rebuilding roads. Is that because of the time commitment of the staff, or where did that come about that only $500,000 would be spent on rural roads?
I'm saying the rebuild that you're talking about is much like what's being done on Road 140.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of work you're saying could be done in other sections. And again, we'll look at the busier roads first and go to the less busy roads after that. But we could add to the capital program rebuilds on small sections and widenings maybe on small sections as well. It isn't there now. You're correct. These are class 5 and class 6 roads with very little traffic on them. And the spring problem we have, if it's only 1 or 2 weeks and the additional gravel is helping to keep that from falling apart, then we're doing a good job in those sections.
And I think, just to help Lyndon, I think part of what, to answer your question, it is staff resources. So right now, our staff resources are spending the majority of their construction time out on 140. Could we look at more outside help? Possibly, but that does bring in additional resources. So 140 certainly is taking the majority of our men's time in the summertime as far as the rural construction project. We could maybe reevaluate that if we want to skip a year or two, but that's where the majority of our staff time is spent.
I find myself interested, and this is sort of supplementary to Councillor Barron's question. Do we maintain a good plan around which rural roads look like they're at that point where they need remedy? Because what I'm hearing is we've spent so much time focused on 140 that perhaps we are omitting or neglecting some others. And the important question is, do we know what we're neglecting, if we are at all? CEO Snell?
So I think one of the challenges we've always had, and it's going to be addressed during the master plan, is, and Lyndon talked about this early, we need to identify what our roads artillery system is going to be. What's our arterial roads, what's our collector roads, and what's our tertiary roads? That's never really been truly defined. We know, and Lyndon knows, what roads have a few cars on them and what roads have many cars on them. And certainly, in some ways, to answer the question of council, is all our roads could probably use work, depending on who you talk to of the day. But I think for the first time in a long time, I think both Lyndon's staff and the help of the asset management, the finance staff, we're taking a good hard look at road condition, and with the master plan, road use, and then coming up with a plan. And there'll be still roads at the end of this that maybe you only see a few hundred cars a day, but council may still get complaints about them. But it's really going to come down to prioritization.
I'll ask one more supplementary myself, and that is with regards to some of the rural roads. One of the common concerns that I hear is that they're not wide enough for modern farm equipment. So when you talk about asset management and strategies that evaluate those roads, I trust that we may want to consider the issue of whether those roads need to be widened as well as their physical state.
Yep. Just to answer the first question, we have that inventory done. We inspect every road every month, all year long. We do know where these sections are. We did find that it changes from spring to spring. So, and there aren't many, but there are some. And I mean, we can earmark them, and probably for next year's capital program, maybe we add a section on local rebuilds, and we could dedicate, maybe half a kilometer of work, whatever that cost would be, to those sections and see if it would be beneficial. And I would say that actually those traffic counts are less than 50 vehicles per day. And if we sign it, and we say that it's a bumpy road, and that they're well identified, and it's a very short duration, maybe it's a risk that we're willing to assume.
CEO Snell.
And certainly I understand the issue we have with our rural roads and the ever-evolving farm community and the type of equipment we're seeing on our roads. But let's use 140 as an example. 140, we're only paying half the cost. There's probably been close to $2 million spent on that road so far, and we're only about maybe 2/3 done. So if we were paying the full cost of that, it would be, it'd be expensive, or over a long period of time to get accomplished what we've done in 140. I agree. There's many roads that could be widened and rebuilt, but it's an expensive process and a lengthy process at this rate. So we're really going to have to decide what's the priority, and we can do it. But it's almost like the asset management plan. It's going to take a lifetime to get them all to the point where we want them.
What interests me, I'll ask one more comment or one more question about this. What interests me, though, is that I think to Councillor Barrett's comment, there isn't a single rural road other than 140 that seems to be identified in the current capital project estimates. And I suppose that comes as a little bit of a surprise to Councillor Barrett's and to me as well. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't be thinking, and maybe we'll come to that when we get to council direction, about whether there is something in 2020 that we need to do on that front. It may be that the staff answer based on evaluation of asset status is no, but at least we want to make sure that that's been validated. And if you think there's a big concern that lies out there somewhere, some segments as you described, I think we'd like to hear about it.
Just to answer a couple of things very quickly, the 9-meter platform that we're putting on Road 140, 9 meters, is not the cross-section that this council has asked for trucking and farm routes. The 8 meters of asphalt that's going on line 84 with up to 2 meters on each side of gravel shoulder is the cross-section. It's only possible on line 84 because the poles are far enough apart and we don't have high sections of road. We don't own enough road to go that wide on many of the roads we're talking about. They're too high to go that wide. We'd be borrowing cornfield. So that's the reality behind that. So the 9-meter platform we have on 140 is maybe not meeting that standard, but it's getting better and getting closer. What we've earmarked for preservation on rural roads, on good roads, keeping them better longer, is up to 4 kilometers. So it's the same program that we've had. I could look at the projections for next year and the 2 years following and bring back other resurfacing possibilities for this year and next year.
I would be happier if you would say at some point in time, we're going to have a council session where we're going to talk about the master plan. We're going to talk about the primary, secondary, and tertiary roads. We're going to, as a council, make a decision. 250 cars or less, we're just grading the road and putting on maintenance gravel when we need to, type thing. But like, so that we can develop something that says, okay, because you have changed it quite a bit, and some of the roads are quite a bit better because of the change in the crown in the road and taking off the edge, right, so that it drains properly. I'm sorry, I did not mean to intend to beat you up about not having a rural road here. I just wondered, like, it's noticeably absent, number one. But I would rather, and you know, because of all your predecessors know, Lyndon, I've harped and harped and harped about having a transportation grid to move people through the municipality. We are never going to pave roads to take the new combines down. We're never going to pay, or we're never going to build roads for that. And that's a disconnect between agriculture and transportation, because unfortunately sometimes we've got farmers sneaking through with the headers on that is completely dangerous, but some of the stuff is just too wide. It's not going to fit on whether we do 9 meters or not. Like, it's not going to fit. So I think we have to be realistic and pave to what we need. What we need are the milk trucks and the feed trucks and all of those types of things. Farmers will get their combines and that to wherever they need to go, but I just think we have to pay attention to what we're doing and how we're doing and kind of setting some guidelines in place.
Yeah, I will defer to the transportation master plan. It is to look at what are our primary roads and our secondary roads and start designating what those are. It's going to be dictated a little bit about the urban centers and how we bypass them, what roads become the most heavily used and which roads we rebuild first. So that should put our 5-year plan in place. If we're talking rural gravel, we'll have a parallel plan for that in terms of what's got the most traffic, what needs the most work for upgrades as well. So yeah, we hear that. That will take 1 to 2 years of probably putting that together for council to discuss, but everyone's going to be a part of the master plan process.
Sorry, I think I said the last was my last comment. But you are getting to know the roads too. Like, you know, my side road is a main transportation route over to Hensall. And at certain times of the year, it has to be maintained a little bit better than others, right? So yous are getting to know the roads as well. But I doubt if that particular knowledge fact is going to show up in any transportation study. So it still requires our local workers who work in the wards to know, okay, but people are cutting up here and going across here type thing for the farm and agricultural people, because that's a different transportation grid than what the normal traveling public would be.
Seasonal, yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Johnston?
I will give credit on 140 where we have shaped it properly. So the ditches, the shoulders / ditches are shaped that yes, it's a 9-meter platform, but really it travels a lot wider than that. Because if you've got two large pieces meeting, there is room to get over onto that slope. So when we do rebuild these roads, I will say where there's room, you guys are doing a great job of giving that extra room.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson?
Thank you. Through you. Just jumping ahead to the cemetery, if I might, or we have to
Please.
Yeah. Just a question, a clarification, and refreshing my memory. What items were not available from overseas?
Actually, the estate columbarium that was ordered, it wasn't that they didn't have one in stock in the beginning. It was dedicated to somewhere else, and I should have rephrased that. They couldn't get it in from China due to the tariffs and restrictions, except trying to get it through India, and the timeline
But
was
the
just far too long.
columbarium itself.
That's right, the pieces.
Do they not make them in North America? I'm not sparring. I'm just saying. Are they really
only available in China? Wow. And it's only slabs of marble that then get put together.
I smell a wonderful business opportunity.
Yeah, bingo. Like, people would just be dying for that business.
I'm cutting off his microphone now. That's not happening. No. Good try. All right. Any further questions or comments on these items? All right. Does that bring us to, did we talk about NEMP? In my book, it says project. So we've got through all of your projects, Lyndon?
Yes, I believe
All
so,
right.
yep.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to tab 8. Council, we're close-ish, I think, to the end of the meeting. So with your indulgence, shall we just keep moving through? Yeah, great. All right. So item 4.5, tab number 8 in your binders, the Manager of Environmental Services, Mark Hackett. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Looking at the Solid Waste Division first, the 2019 Capital Project Review. We've been working on the listable landfill remedial action plan for a few years now. As we discussed the other night, we have the contaminated attenuation zone agreements prepared and ready to move forward with those in 2020. We did some work on the next cell at the Alma landfill, where we removed some topsoil, put in a roadway, and prepared that cell. And we also installed late in the year the generator at the landfill. Looking at 2020, there's 2 project sheets. One is a carryover of the listable landfill remedial action plan. Again, that will be mainly negotiating those CAS agreements with the landowners around the listable landfill, and also to do a geophysical survey of the area. And that was for about $16,500. And also wanted to do a bit more work on the landfill cell construction there, the area that we did. We were able to find a really nice seam of like pit run gravel there that we've been using, and so it got a little wet this year, and we want to just firm that up this year, do a bit more work on that so that it's more usable throughout the year, make it more stable. So that's basically it for the landfill.
Council, questions on the landfill estimates? Okay, next.
Next one is the wastewater treatment plant. we continue with the upgrades. They're almost complete. We demolished the old headworks just today, so that was good. We're doing a final tie-in, and the project is basically complete except for a few things that will get done, like the paving up top and some of the grading of the areas up there. So it's really very close to being complete, and excited about that. The 2019 also saw the biosolids upgrades, and that project is basically complete and it's in operation. We put in some fencing around the lagoon, and there was a project to do some tree and shrub planting, but we weren't really able to get at that. The access to that area was not very good with all the construction going on. So looking at 2020, the projects for this year, we have to finalize the upgrades. So I did hand out that sheet there that shows the remaining work to be done for 2020. I think it was around $977,000 remaining to complete that project. The tree planting project, we've got a plan for that as well, to plant some trees around the lagoon area out there. And so this is to purchase the trees, and we've been in contact with the Maitland Valley Rejuvenation Committee. They do a bunch of projects each year where they do planting, and so they're very interested in doing the tree planting, which will save us some money there and be a good opportunity for volunteers to do that. This project the plantings might be spread out over the next few years. It doesn't all have to be done in one year, but so that's the plan for that for next year. Another project we're looking at is finalizing the reports for the inflow and infiltration assessment that was done on the wastewater collection system, so that all the data has been collected, and we're just waiting for the final report. So we're expecting that anytime soon. The next one is the re-rating of the wastewater treatment plant. This kind of ties in with all the work that we've done over the last couple of years, the design and the work that we've completed at the wastewater treatment plant, so that we're prepared to increase the hydraulic rating. That's the amount of flow that we're allowed to treat there. With all the growth that's going on in North Perth, Council is well aware that we need to make sure we have the capacity at the wastewater treatment plant to handle all that. And I'm comfortable that when we go through this process, we'll be able to increase our capacity. We're hoping to move it from 9,000 cubic meters a day to around 12,000. And that would be done through basically it's a study that's done where they do a stress test, do a lot of testing, where we'll run the plan on half of the equipment, and to prove to the Ministry of Environment and Conservation and MECP. Anyway, they change their names all the time. To prove to them that we're capable and of being able to handle that amount of flow, and that will be a big relief moving forward for me anyway. And so that it kind of ties in with GM Blue Clan having done this work, that we've done all of this upgrades to get to this point, to be able to get to move on from here and be able to re-rate the plant and make sure we have enough uncommitted reserve capacity. So that was, I think, $225,000. That would include a desktop analysis, as I mentioned, the extensive sampling program, process modeling, and stress testing. And the final one for there is a pump replacement. One of the return activated sludge pumps, it's one of the original ones it's about 26 years old now. It just is in need of repair. It was taken out to have it repaired, and it was going to be around $25,000 to repair it, and the cost to replace it was, as I mentioned there, $38,455. So we're going to replace that pump. I think that is all of them for the wastewater treatment plant.
Questions on this? Can I just ask sort of an odd technical question. I don't know whether it's going to make any sense, so you'll have to tell me. When these adjustments and the re-rating happens, um, how much excess capacity versus what we actually use as a municipality now, what we have in place, that we can absorb in terms of new growth or whatever?
Well, basically, when you look at the uncommitted reserve capacity of the plant, right now there's a calculation that gets done. It looks at flows over the last 3 years or 5-year period. It looks at the amount of new homes. It looks at the amount of construction and things like that. There's a number of factors that go into that. By moving from our plant, daily capacity is 9,030 cubic meters a day. That's what we're allowed to treat. Our flows, when they hit 80%, that's when you might get into issues where the ministry is going to say, you're going to have to slow down your building or stop it. You need to do some work. We're so far ahead of that now because we've done all this work preparing to get to this point of having the re-rating done. When we move to, if we get to the 12,000, if we're lucky to do that enough to get there, prepared enough, not lucky, but prepared enough, and and are successful, that would take our lots. I don't know the exact number, but up to many years of growth there would be available from moving there. It's not increasing the peak capacity of the plant. The peak capacity is at 25,500, I believe, cubic meters a day. So it's not adjusting that. It's what we can treat during the day. And we handle those flows now. We can't really control what comes into the plant. So we're handling flows in excess of that successfully. We just have to prove it that we can do it on a sustained period of time.
CAO Snell, but you want to further enlighten me?
So this has always been an issue I've had with the Ministry of Environment and the way they even calculate this. So, for example, a wet year where we have lots of snow and a long period of snow melt and lots of rain, it actually eats into our capacity. For example, the storm that went through southwestern Ontario, we were handling flows of over our peak capacity. So we were up to 27 cubic meters for a couple of days. And so on an average day in July, when we only have just the people contributing to our sewage treatment plant, our flows probably run about 3 or 4 cubic meters a day, which is really only a third of our plant's capacity. This is when we have events like we had in January and wet springs, where we're dealing with those days where it's 27 and 28. It really throws that number out of balance, and so it's not that we can't handle the average July day when it's just people and industry contributing to our system. It's when we have rainfall events that really mess up that calculation.
But generally, we have a lot of headroom, and it's getting better and better as we move ahead.
That's the goal, yes. Okay. Part of the infiltration inflow study is to look at that, to find areas where in town where there are problem areas. If we fix those, you'll also gain time and capacity.
Okay. Any further questions on these projects, these estimates, Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks very much. I appreciate your, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks. I appreciate your comments, Mark. Last Monday, we had a letter from the Zion United Church, I think it was, or Calvary, the 3 Point Church, anyway. But perhaps we could inform them of if this project moves forward in terms of tree planting, they might be willing to offer their services as well. I mean, I wish we had, I think, was it two or three more trees, whatever it is, that's going to get us up to the a nice even number of trees to plant there. Now, my question is, and not to get into the details here, when you're saying large stock, how large is large? I take it there. It must be that people can actually have shovels and plant them as opposed to calling in a mini excavator or something.
Yeah, large stock you'd still be able to plant, I believe, by hand. It's when you're talking the small stock, they're talking like the little ones. So these might be 3 feet in height.
Yeah, I presume that's what you meant, because I mean, if Middle Maitland, which does a great job, we've helped out there before, but I suspect just our hot off the press letter from the United Church, they might be interested in helping as well. So thanks.
Thanks. Good recollection there. Any further questions or comments? Okay, Councillor Rothwell, yeah, go ahead.
We still have a few more yet, right? The SCADA system and so on.
That's for the
Stuff to
water
do.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah.
Okay, Mark, next.
So for the water division, we really only had one project last year, and that was the Molesworth well building upgrade, and that was completed. Looks really good. And in 2020, we have two projects. As Alan mentioned, the SCADA server replacement. That was a project that was actually under the wastewater plant last year, but it's changed a bit. So we are now, we weren't able to do it last year because it was just such a mess out there, so dusty. We didn't want to go and put new equipment in. So this year we're looking at replacing the servers there, both of the servers, and it would have its own server rack, a new UPS, the two servers, the Windows Server 2016, and also do the iFix software upgrades. That's for two different programs for development and runtime, and the data track software upgrade. So that's the stuff that works at the wastewater treatment and the water system. It monitors both. And then we're also looking at replacing at all the well sites, putting in 24-volt power supplies and for the PLC power that would have redundancy at all the sites. So we had an issue there where we lost communications because of a failure of one of those. So we thought they were getting older. We wanted to replace all of them, and that's at all of the well sites. So those are, I think. Oh, sorry. And we also have well 5 well rehab. So we have 8 wells that we look after in our North Perth systems. Each one of those wells gets done every 8 years. And so well 5 will have a downhole video done of it. It will be checked out as part of the maintenance plan where they do performance tests and maintenance inspection. Also at well 5 in Listowel, the piping inside is getting very old and corroded, and we're having a few concerns about it. The air release valve, the flow meter, the well piping, and the flow control valve, we're looking at replacing all of those in that well. At that same time, we're also looking at the roof is leaking, the windows are in very poor shape, so we also want to kind of do this all at one whack and have it all done in a couple-week period.
Okay. Questions or comments on those final estimates from Mark?
Thanks very much. When we were talking at through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mark, we were talking about our IT master plan. We talked about cloud computing and so on, and we're here. We've got existing servers, and we're looking at replacing them with 2 new servers. Had we looked at having instead of on-site servers going to the cloud, or was that part of the conversation at all?
I believe we've kind of talked about it, but because of the importance of the SCADA system and the controls and the security and access, we've always kind of kept that separate from everything else in the municipality, so that there's no way to kind of prevent hacking and that type of thing. And so I don't know if that's a very good answer or not, but that's sort of where we've been going with it. We've always done that separately from the municipal office servers.
Looks like Treasurer Hale wants to offer comment.
If I might, too, the SCADA software itself is very specialized, and actually we have one contract person that provides that for us. And so we have learned over the years that it's best that is a single-sourced package for that. I wouldn't say that it is being updated. I believe the vendor is providing a new version for us.
Yes, that's part of the software.
But it's still not the most advanced. It's very sturdy database, and it's one of those things that we just haven't played with too much, and we've just maintained it as it is. And actually, our IT does very little to be involved in that. We've really left it with the provider of the software. It's just worked out over the years to be a much easier scenario just because of the sensitivity of the data and the software itself.
Much. I appreciate the response, and I appreciate the staff have looked into that as well. I mean, at the last two conferences we've attended, we've heard at length in terms of the importance of ensuring that our computer systems, well, everyone's computer system, but certainly for municipalities, are safe and secure and so on. So as long as staff are satisfied that we're there, and clearly SCADA systems are clearly important. These programmable logic controls, PLCs, are crucial to ensure the safe maintenance of everything. So I've got no problem with that. I just want to make sure that, I mean, the information that is shared with staff and at conferences and so on is that we're at least aware of that, and so on. So I mean, if that's our system going forward, I think that's great. I think it was very appropriate to postpone the installation of this. Computers hate dusty and dirty conditions, so I think it was probably very prudent to put it off. Thank you.
Any further questions on the estimates? Okay, that brings us to item 4.6. I'm not sure I know what the actionable is here. It says tab 9, capital overview. So there is a sheet in the binder. Let me switch the source. That I guess consolidates all of the projects. Treasurer Hale, are you speaking? Okay. Ms. Balfour is going to speak to this one. Thank you.
Mayor Kasenberg, Council. So on the combined sheet, you'll see that we had the $19,725,000 budgeted for 2020 and $21,226,000 for 2021. So that wraps up our overall capital budget review with senior staff. And I guess we are looking for some direction from council as to, are you content with the projects on the books currently, or would you like to see us make any changes or any suggestions for moving forward? Finance worked well with the senior staff in looking at assets to the best of our ability currently with what we have on the books to try and come up with the best projects possible. So I also put a sheet on at everyone's table just of the 2018 to 2021 budget and actuals, just so as of 2 days ago. So I guess we're just looking for direction from council, if any.
Sure, thank you. So, councillors, we've worked our way now through all of the capital estimates, project estimates from staff. Anything in that you see that you wish to have brought forward for further staff attention before consolidation and our next budget iteration? Maybe we look at this. Let me try looking at this in a couple of different ways. Any projects that you're aware of that you would like to see added, or at least considered for addition to the capital estimates? Okay, seeing none. Any that you'd like to see amended, changed in a material way, other than ways that have already been described, for example, tonight by Mr. Couch and in some of his ancillary documentation? Okay. Anything that we should be considering removing from the capital spend in 2020, project spend in 2020, based on what you've seen so far? Councillor Seiler.
I just thought our Parks and Rec looked very busy. There's a lot on the agenda for that, and I can't see us doing all that was brought up in next year. There's a whole lot there, and I don't know what order you want to do it in, but I know there's a lot even just what we spoke tonight on project 8 and 9, and then with the dam, and I just, I'm not too sure
that they're going to get
where
through.
we're going with that.
Okay. So, yeah, and in fact, it's interesting if you look at the documentation that was provided tonight about the sort of capital project flow over the last few years. This certainly is an ambitious year for recreation, depending or based on the projected spends here. So I think you're right, especially in comparison to 2019 actuals. It looks like they intend almost a fourfold increase in activity between 2019 and 2020. Some of the 2019, I assume, is some carryover into 2020, but nevertheless, that has implications for human resources, and it's definitely jumping the game up substantially. So I think if I'm following what you're asking, Terry, you're curious about whether staff can give us some projections and timelines and show us these projects lined up against each other so we can determine whether that's a reasonable workload or not.
Exactly, because if they, if we're going to pass it and it doesn't get done, I think it's tough for us and tough for staff.
Right, and
just don't want to bite off more than we can chew.
Sure, and I actually expressed a little concern about that for what it's worth. I mean, again, if you look at this capital overview or projects overview year to year for the last few years, you see that in 2019 the budget was 18.3 million and the spend was 10.45, which means that quite a bit's carrying over. I appreciate that can happen, weather can impact projects, etc. But perhaps the thing that concerns me the most is that a reflection that we just do not have enough human resources to make a lot of this happen. And if that's the case, then perhaps part of the direction to staff is, one, to give us reasonable schedules and let us look at this, and two, let's hear the requests about human resources to start addressing some of this. Councillor Andreessen, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo those sentiments. I am also a government employee, and I know that in my world of government, these rollovers, that I'm looking at here are pretty extensive. And so, it's hard to make decisions about where we should be putting money, but the fact that we're rolling over quite a bit is understandable. We understand why. There's a lot, like you said, a lot of weather considerations, but I have to echo all those comments. This money has been set aside, and it hasn't been able to be allocated for different reasons. Maybe we do need to think about what's manageable, what's possible, and perhaps it needs to go other places. I don't know.
Well, and this raises an issue that we've sort of heard loosely talked about at this table already, which is the question of whether we need to create sort of a facilities and project management kind of operation within the municipal staff structure. I believe the Human Resources Committee will be hearing some propositions about this in the near future. CAO Snell, does that sound right to you? But certainly, there's been some suggestion that may build efficiency and allow us to get some more of this work done. If you look at the spend from 2019 against the budget, we were maybe at 60% spend, if I'm looking at these numbers right, and yet we're actually proposing an increase in 2020. I appreciate some of that's carried over, and 2021 also forecasts an increase in that spending. So we're getting into zones where we're spending a lot of money, and the question is, are we optimized from human resources and other factors to make that happen, right? So stuff for us to consider, certainly. I don't know whether we want to apply a little pressure as council on the staff with regards to creating a facilities or project management office, or at this time, or should we let the process of HR unfold? Go ahead, Julie.
We're talking budget. We're not talking HR. We're not talking anything else right now. We're talking the capital overview budget. We're getting a little bit sidelined. Let HR committee do its work. Let the staff do their work in bringing it forward through the proper channels.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to that. I would argue that capital budget needs human resources in some cases to be achieved. And so if the plan isn't accurate or realistic, maybe, and I think that's what Councillor Seiler was asking about, then we need to hear about the ways of resolving that. Treasurer Hill.
Yes, and I believe that we would take that into consideration on a budget forward thinking for our next meeting, and that we'll ask department heads to look at their budgets that they have brought forward and looking at the realistic, whether it's recreation, public works, finance, IT, whatever department, that we actually take a good hard look at what might not be able to be achieved because of, and prioritize those for council possibly for the next meeting. If I might, while I have the mic, the other thing that always happens at this time of year is that we ask council to consider giving us the approval to go ahead, conditional on budget approval, that we actually bring back some, or have the opportunity to do some tendering. And I believe the mayor has a resolution to that effect, such that we can get out there and see what the prices are. Sometimes it's good news and we can do as much or more than we did last year with the same dollars. And sometimes we realize that, say, asphalt or something is in a different price league than what we thought. So we would like that opportunity to move ahead with some tendering and pricing conditional on budget approval.
Sure. Let me just be sure that council doesn't have any last direction before we consider the resolution and move the meeting along against our agenda. Councillor Johnston.
Fran, I would call this budget, the capital budget, fairly aggressive. In your opinion, do you feel we are addressing any of our infrastructure deficit? We had talked a bit ago about, over many, many years, upping our capital to decrease that deficit.
Oh, for sure. We are struggling with fixing up the old and moving forward with the new. You're fully aware of that. So, and there's no doubt about it, we are aggressive. We are looking at helping in terms of the development of the municipality in a very substantial way. So we are doing a bit of a juggling. We have been successful at that in the past couple decades. And so hopefully we'll be able to lay out a plan that both council and staff feel comfortable with and recommending that you move forward with. But there is some Peter Paul scenarios that, and we do have investments in land that we need to, fulfill our plan with so that we can move forward with the next one. Otherwise, you're going to be back wanting to borrow money to be able to move forward. And I really don't know that you want to do a whole lot more of that. The whole interest rates have been stable. So if you're ever going to do it in the next 20 years, you might, it might be something to consider. But yeah, there's a lot of things for council to consider. That's for sure.
CAO Snell.
And just to further add to that, I think one of the things, and I think it's helped since we created the listable stormwater management area, and certainly members of council who have been on council for a number of years will know the history. We had several areas of significant stormwater in listable, particularly listable, which have been fixed through 2 major projects so far, and the Albert Street trunk is sort of the last of the remaining of those significant projects. Between the number 1 drain and the north, I don't know what we call that, the NERP, and Albert Street, we've probably spent close to $15 million on just stormwater improvements, and that will be paid off by the residents who would benefit from that eventually. But when you look at Lyndon's project list, it makes up half of his $13 million. And it's been, as most of these projects go, it seems to grow every time Lyndon turns it around for various reasons, but I think we've got it nailed down now. But it's a significant project, and I'm glad it's finally going to get out the door. But I certainly agree. There's a lot to be done,
Fran and I had this discussion today. I'm just not sure how to take the priorities. Like it gets difficult when you start looking at what we just push off into the future because they're all fairly high priority. But we'll ask staff to take one more look at it.
Every once in a while, I go to the CIO and say we have to cut, and every once in a while he comes to me and says we have to cut, and then we realize though that there's so many pieces of the puzzle that if you stop this, it's just like any renovation. There's always this is a good time, good time, and so trying to optimize those projects moving forward, doing things together that make sense, or splitting apart a project because we can't handle it all at one time.
Don't mistake, I think, the questions that were asked as criticism. I think the questions are asked in the interests of making sure that the municipality has a reasonable and realistic plan for moving forward, and we want to be sure that we don't watch an exodus of our staff because we've burned you all out. I think that's a big piece of
And we do appreciate that, and we understand that. And we do have to look at what we have planned for the coming years, because it's looking very ambitious to me, and I'm thinking we maybe have to take that back and prioritize those a little bit.
Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, and Councillor Duncan can contest that I've got show me the money on the bottom of my sheet here.
Just a second.
Because, I mean, you're looking at 19, almost 20 million this year. We've already projected 21 million next year. Now, it says on our sheets that none of this is on the tax levy.
It does?
Yes, it does. So what I'm concerned about is I know that that can't possibly be true because we don't have that kind of money in reserves. So what I need to see is the next step to see, and I agree, sometimes you have to be a little bit aggressive, but when you take a look of what we've got projected and the projects that we've applied for funding for, I'm just trying to figure out where are we getting all this money from?
So in the short term for 2020, a lot of what you're seeing there is carryover money that has been repeated. So we do have a bit of a buildup, but then if all the money that's next year is 21 is new money, then no, we're not prepared. So that is something where hopefully our asset management plan will come into play. Becky's been working very hard at that. What you're seeing right now is just, these are projections, but we will have a better plan that will, we might have to borrow some years, some short-term money to do a project, and then we wouldn't be doing it for the next 2 years. We will have to do some short-term financing possibly, but no, we're not prepared if that 21 million's new money to move forward with that as it's shown. We'll have to do something different. The 19, because some of it's been, as you noted, carried over, and so there's duplicate dollars in those budgets. We're prepared for that, but the 21, if that's all new, then you're absolutely right. We're not prepared for that.
Well, the way I'm reading it would appear that is all new money. The 21.
Yes, that's the way
because
I
we
read
haven't
that as well.
projected that we're,
No.
except for the projects on the individual sheets that
But then
suggested
they've been
to
identified separately, yeah.
But my concern is the next step, or the next budget meeting, which I believe is February 26th, not 29th, is on our sheet.
It's the 12th, isn't it?
Okay, well, I've got.
Is it the 13th?
It says the 29th, but I'm not coming Saturday night for anybody. So, but I'm assuming that we'll see that next piece.
5 and 7's 12. It's the 12th.
That just didn't get changed from the last meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your next meeting in regards to the 2020 budget is Wednesday, February the 12th.
Yeah.
Okay,
I was
thank you.
coming that night anyway.
But just so that, because I think the thing is sometimes we get a little bit confused about the segregated surplus, and the development charges. We had a couple questions about that, and there's many different forms of the way the money comes in, but when it's projected on our sheet that there's no tax levy in this.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
I'm thinking, how can there possibly not be, right?
Yes. So,
and I know how it's done in
I was
the
just
budget.
going to say.
But it's misleading or confusing for even some of the more senior councillors, let alone the new ones who've only had one budget year, to remember how does this all work. So I'm assuming that that's what we'll see the next budget meeting.
Definitely. And we do something a little different in North Perth. A few municipalities do it. We actually budget for depreciation, and it's a non-cash expenditure. And so that makes us a little different in our accounting, and I've often brought it to council and said, you know, do you want me to continue this or not? And I've always gotten the nod, yes, continue to do it. But it's a little unorthodox, but it has served us, I believe, fairly well in the past. Since 2009, it's been something since we've been required to have assets on our financial statements. So, I mean, that's always something that if it's something that council doesn't want to continue with, I can go either way. I see the pros and cons either way.
Sure, I'm going to recognize the CAO. Let's keep this short now and move on.
Yeah, I would brief, but I guess, and this is always a problem with presenting multi-year budgets and stuff, and although I think it's healthy, the 2021 budget, obviously, even the $8.8 million in recreation, a lot of that's at 90% grant funding, which doesn't, so that'll change drastically if we don't get those grants. And that's sort of the reality, or it'll be postponed. It may not change drastically, but it's not happening in 2021 if we don't get some of that grant money.
Okay, I'm getting to that point where I want to start limiting this, but Councillor Andreessen?
Well, I guess that's one of my concerns as well, is that in the event that we don't get grant money, what do we do next? Because from what I've seen, this work has to be done. And I'm thinking specifically about Listowel Library, even EMCC work, which with that library addition, you know, there's some pretty serious asset management work to do with those two projects, and we're going to figure out what we're going to do if that grant money doesn't come.
Yes.
And that day is coming soon, we
Yeah.
suspect. We will need a plan B. I've been saying that all along, and I suspect this council will have opportunity to have a freewheeling discussion about what plan B will look like, because you're right, there are some things that lie ahead that we're going to find hard to duck. Thank you. Any last council direction comments? Anything you want focused for the staff to act on? Councillor Rothwell?
So if I understand correctly, I've heard staff say that they're willing to go back and sort of give us a priority list in terms of what they believe can be accomplished, and just sort out for us what is, and our list shows some of this, but which ones of these capital projects are grant dependent, and those that we have to make a decision as council as to whether, if we don't get the grant, we're moving ahead. So there's a couple we talked about, the red grants and such. So I would like to sort of see that list from staff and say, here's the capital projects that are reliant on grants, and then, or council's decision if we're proceeding or not. And then back to other councillors' comments here, here's what's truly achievable. Yes, this is our wish list of things that we'd like to do. Here's our must do, and here's what we think we can do. I'd like to see almost three separate things, plus the fact in terms of the capital programs that are grant reliant. That's what I'd like. So it's almost four issues I'd like to see staff bring back before, because we as councillors, I mean, to a point, second year in here, yeah, I've got lots of knowledge and such, but I want to hear directly from our staff which ones have to be done and which ones should be done or could be done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's sort of what they call the Moscow analysis. Must have, could have, etc. So I think that's a very useful suggestion at this point. Perhaps one of the things the staff can think about, CAO Snell, is whether we can sort of attach almost probabilities of completion of projects within 2020 from your best guess. I'm not being Mr. Spock here. I'm not asking you to be very precise about your guesses to 6 decimal places. I'm just saying give us a band or a range of best guess about probability of success in 2020 on some of these projects. And perhaps if we stratify, as Councillor Rothwell has suggested, that would certainly give us a little more insight into where to move forward. So thank you for that. Very helpful. Any last direction for staff? Okay. That moves us to agenda item 6. I don't believe we'll entertain any announcements. Last Monday's meeting was the opportunity for that. Item 6.2, there is no planned closed session meeting that I'm aware of. We should deal with the attenders motion. Thank you. Let's do that. So I have a resolution for consideration, Council, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approve the circulation of tender and proposal documents conditional on the 2020 budget approval by Council. Can I invite over Councillor Duncan? Thank you. Councillor Richardson? Thank you. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, by show of hands, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And let's have our confirmatory bylaw then at this point. As item 7.1, I have a draft for us that bylaw number 19-2020, being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the Mayor and the Clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Behrens, thank you, and Deputy Mayor Kellum. Any discussion or debate? By show of hands, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And is there anything else we need to address before we adjourn? Seeing no indication of that, I have a motion for adjournment that reads as follows: that the council meeting adjourns to meet again for general council business on Monday, February 3rd, 2020. Can I invite a mover? Councillor Richardson, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Rothwell. By show of hands, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. This meeting is adjourned.